Businesses, as we've mentioned throughout the afternoon, are going to lose federal and state support gradually once those vaccine thresholds are hit at 70 and 80%. Treasurer Frydenberg's been forced to defend the timing given COVID cases are climbing right now. New South Wales says they will go it alone, though, beyond the 80% threshold to provide support for business through November. I spoke to the New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet. Treasurer Dominic Perrottet, thanks so much for your time. What's your message to businesses in New South Wales today? With the support phasing out, obviously you're trying to get them to that period of reopening, but reopening out of a pandemic, it's an uncertain time, isn't it?
Well, it's very uncertain, Kieran, but ultimately, if you look at last year, we had great success here in our state. We lost, close to 300,000 jobs. We recovered all of them, and the economy was stronger out the other side. And it's my view that that will happen again. We've said from the start here in our state that we want to make sure that we put businesses and workers before the budget position, and that's why we've invested now close to $8 billion in financial support for businesses. Today we've made the decision to keep our component of the JobSaver program to businesses all the way through to the 30th of November, and we think that'll really help during the reopening as businesses get back to doing what they do best, as people come back into work, and we think a bright time is certainly going to be ahead for our state as we move through this next period.
On that JobSaver component that you announced today, you're going to keep that all the way through till the end of November, as you suggested there. Did you want the federal government to also continue that support? Did you make that case?
Look, we always have very robust discussions with our colleagues in Canberra, but ultimately we're grateful for the support that they've provided, because I think if you look at the JobKeeper program last year, I think the JobSaver support and the disaster payment support that the federal government has provided during this period of time has really helped businesses stay afloat, and what we certainly want to see now is a lot of those workers transition off that disaster payment and into paid wages. And I'm very confident as we open up here in our state. If you look at the savings rate generally, there's a lot of built-up demand here, and I think we're going to power out of it.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope for a much brighter summer, that's for sure. Now, beyond that 80% mark, though, did you want to see it taper off just so that those artificial supports would not be there when people are trying to reopen? Was that your thinking, to still keep it at that level that, as you said, you've gone out alone on it now? Would it still taper, even if the feds did contribute?
Well, what we've said is that we'll continue to contribute our 50% at the reduced rate of 30% of payroll. So that's kind of the figure that I think we needed in circumstances where there are still going to be some restrictions in place. So as we move to December, we're going to have 4 square metre rules in place. There'll be various caps in place as well for businesses. So yes, as we reopen, it's going to be a big boost for the business community and for workers across our state. But I certainly think there was need to provide some continuing support, and ultimately this will then coincide with our recovery plan, which we'll announce in October. But I also think, Kieran, that businesses will still need to qualify on 2 counts for this, and that is that they've had a turnover reduction of 30% and that they keep their workers on. So I would expect, as we hit our 70% and 80% marks and as we're opening up, that many businesses will fall out of the system. That's a positive thing as they get back on their feet and open up all businesses right across our state.
So, Treasurer, when you look at situations, though, as we're in this transition phase, if there are pockets in the regions or in LGAs, local government areas, that have an outbreak, and as the Doherty plan suggests, there might need to be a short, localised lockdown, would you like to see the federal government provide support in that instance? Would you be looking to provide economic support in that instance to businesses?
Kieran, we certainly will, and it's not a precise science, and we don't have crystal balls here in determining where the future is, but vaccination has been our key to opening up, And if I look at where we're heading above 90%, that's an incredibly positive thing for our state. And that should be the main factor that mitigates against having to go into further lockdowns. As you say, though, in the Doherty report, it is predicted that there may be times where we will need to have localised restrictions in place based on the health situation, and we will look at that at the time. But I think what's been successful, and I know there's a lot of negativity out there and there's always a bit of division and robust discussions between states and the Commonwealth, but I think overall, if you look at the success of our country in terms of the health side of things and the economic side of things, we've done very well, and I think part of that success has been the partnership, particularly the financial partnership between the state and federal government. So my expectation would be if those situations occurred in the future, I'd certainly be on the phone to Josh Frydenberg and asking for his assistance alongside what we'll put in.
I'm sure he'd expect it, given the form of recent months, Treasurer. Now, you mentioned the comprehensive economic recovery plan that's coming next month. In broad terms, I'm not expecting you to go through all the detail today, but in broad terms, can you tell me what you're thinking on that? Because already I sense from you there is an optimism that this will be a rebound, like the V-shaped recovery we saw out of the last recession.
Yeah, I really believe that will be the case, and part of our success last year was, as I said earlier, that we prioritised investing in the economy and stimulating spending. And I think one of the, when I'm looking at putting this package together at the moment, it's looking past into last year and seeing what are the areas of, as we move from response to recovery. So you're kind of pulling back on direct business support and moving into those investments that will stimulate various areas of construction work, getting consumer spending there, which really plays into business confidence and consumer confidence. So they're the areas that we're looking at, and there'll be a broad array of measures that go to not just ensuring we have a strong rebound out of this, but we come out stronger the other side.
When do you hope international borders will reopen, and when will we see, I guess, New South Wales again at the front when it comes to this, an easing of those quite onerous quarantine requirements down from 14 days to 7 days at home?
Certainly this year, Kieran. I mean, we're currently conducting a pilot in relation to returning Australians. You can't bring international tourism back to this country if someone's got to sit in a hotel for 14 days. And it also makes little sense at a time when COVID will be in the community, where people are double vaccinated, to have the hotel quarantine system in place the way it is. If people are double vaccinated and are coming into Australia, well, they should be able to quarantine at home for a smaller period of time.
New South Wales has a unified position on the net zero target. Why is that important in your mind? And I spoke to Matt Keane yesterday saying it's one of the biggest economic opportunities the nation has had. How do you reflect on that?
Well, Matt Keane's 100% correct, and I think, as David Bowie once said, the future belongs to those who hear it coming, and we in New South Wales want to lead in this space. Matt is completely correct in saying it's not just an environmental play here, it's a substantive economic play. This is the way the world is moving, and we want to be ahead of the curve, and whether that's access to finance, where we issue bonds for debt here in New South Wales, attracting capital investment. This is the way of the future, and this is our hitting that target at the moment. What's incredibly pleasing from what we've seen is that we don't actually have to have that many additional measures at the moment to hit that target based on all the work we've done with renewable energy zones, with our electric vehicle support. I think New South Wales is in a really strong position to reach that target, but ultimately put ourselves on the global scale when we sit back and say that New South Wales is a world leader in this space.
Well, Josh Frydenberg made that point about the capital markets shifting, judgments being made on climate risk and climate risk profiles. So I guess that's central to the point you're making there. How important is it that the federal government follows suit?
Well, I think very important, and Josh clearly identifies this as an important issue moving forward, because he'd be speaking to the same people, that we do every day, and that when you're trying to get access to finance, we know from a lot of those institutions globally that they're looking at those countries who have strong records in this space, and that's not just happening at a governmental level; it's happening at a private sector level as well. So, governments are notoriously slow in following the private sector lead. So I think this is a great opportunity for our state here in New South Wales and for our country to lead the way in this space.
New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet, I appreciate your time as always. Thanks.
Thanks, Kieran.